When Apache tracker Nia saves a dying cowboy from a winter storm, neither expects a love that will test tribal bonds, defy betrayal, and face the law itself. Will their love endure? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The winter wind howled through the canyons of Painted Bluff like an angry spirit. Snow piled high against the rocks, and ice hung from the pine trees like crystal daggers. It was the kind of winter that took lives, the kind that the Apache people respected and feared. Nia pulled her fur-lined cloak tighter around her shoulders as she followed the deer tracks through the snow. At 26, she was the most skilled tracker in her village, and today's hunt could mean the difference between her people eating or going hungry. Her breath came out in white puffs as she moved silently through the forest, her dark eyes scanning the ground ahead. The track suddenly veered left and Nia frowned. Something had spooked the deer. She adjusted her path, moving cautiously, one hand on the knife at her belt. That's when she saw it, a splash of red against the pristine white snow. Blood, but it wasn't from a deer. Beneath a wind-scoured pine lay a man, a white man, a cowboy judging by his clothes. He was half frozen, his face pale except for a nasty gash on his forehead that was still bleeding. Beside him lay a broken compass, its glass face shattered. Nia stood motionless, watching. She should keep walking. How many of her people had white men passed by, leaving them to die? How many broken promises and treaties had destroyed her trust? "Mama," the man whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind as his fingers clutched. The broken compass. Something in his voice, the raw pain, the loneliness, struck Nia's heart. Before she could talk herself out of it, she was kneeling beside him, checking his pulse. It was weak, but he was alive. "You picked a bad day to be in these mountains, cowboy," she said. Though she knew he couldn't hear her, she should leave him. It was the sensible thing to do. But instead, Nia found herself hoisting the stranger onto her shoulders. He was heavy, but she was strong from years of hunting and surviving in this harsh land. The deer would have to wait. She turned toward her winter shelter, a small cave not far from where they were. By the time they reached the cave, Nia was sweating despite the cold. She laid the man down on her sleeping furs near the fire pit and quickly got a fire going. The warmth soon filled the small space, and she set to work examining his wounds. Besides the cut on his head, he had a badly sprained ankle and was suffering from the early stages of frostbite on his fingers and toes. Nia mixed herbs from her medicine pouch with melted snow and cleaned his head wound, then wrapped his ankle tightly with strips of leather. She rubbed a special salve on his frostbitten extremities and covered him with her spare blankets. For 3 days, the man drifted in and out of consciousness. Nia kept the fire burning, forced broth between his lips and changed his bandages. She spoke little but watched him constantly. He was handsome, with strong features and hair the color of the earth after rain. His hands were calloused from work, and even in sleep, there was a tension to him as if he was always ready to flee. On the 4th day, his eyes opened fully, eyes the color of the summer sky, startlingly blue against his weather-beaten face. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. "Safe," Nia replied, handing him a cup of water. "For now." He drank greedily, then looked around the cave with confusion. "You saved me." Nia nodded once. "You were dying in the snow." "Why would you help me?" he asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. She met his gaze steadily. "Would you rather I had left you?" He had the good sense to look ashamed. "No, thank you." Nia went back to grinding herbs with a stone. "Do you have a name, cowboy?" He hesitated, and she could see him considering whether to lie. Finally, he said, Elias McCrae. "I'm Nia. You're Apache," he said, not a question but a statement. "Yes. And you're alone out here?" "My village is 3 days' journey south. I come here to hunt in winter." He tried to sit up, but winced in pain. "I need to get moving. I can't stay." "The storm is still raging," Nia said calmly. "And your ankle?" "I won't hold you. Unless you want to freeze to death after all, you'll stay until both improve." Elias looked like he wanted to argue, but the pain and exhaustion won out. He sank back onto the furs with a sigh. "What were you doing out in such weather?" Nia asked as she handed him a bowl of stew. "Running," he said simply, then seemed surprised by his own honesty. From what? From everything. From nothing. He looked down at the broken compass still, clutched in his hand. From myself, maybe. Nia didn't press further. She understood running. She understood secrets. Days passed, and the storm continued its assault on the mountains. Nia hunted when she could, bringing back rabbits and once a young deer. Elias grew stronger, the color returning to his face, the wound on his head healing. To a thin red line, they fell into a routine. Nia would hunt and gather wood during the day while Elias rested. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, eating in companionable silence. At first, neither spoke much, but gradually walls began to come down. "This compass," Elias said one night, turning the broken object in his hands. "It was my mother's. She gave it to me before she died. Said it would always help me find my way." "Home? Did it?" Nia asked. Elias gave a humorless laugh. "Never had much of a home to find. My pa moved us around a lot after Ma died. Then he died too, and I've been drifting ever since. What about family, friends? None that would claim me now." His eyes took on a haunted look. "I've made my share of mistakes." Nia nodded, understanding more than she let on. "We all have pasts, Elias McCrae." "What's yours?" he asked, genuinely curious. Nia was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. "My parents died in a raid when I was young. My grandmother raised me, taught me to track and heal. But she's gone now too." "I'm sorry," Elias said softly. "Life takes, that's what it does." Nia shrugged. "But sometimes it gives too." Their eyes met across the fire, and something silent passed between them. A recognition of kindred spirits, both familiar with loss. As the days turned into weeks, Elias began to help around the cave. His ankle was healing, and he insisted on not being a burden. He showed Nia how to set snares in a different way that caught more rabbits. He carved a new bowl for her when hers cracked. He told her stories from his travels, making her laugh with tales of the characters he'd met, and Nia found herself sharing more too. She taught him words in her language. She showed him how to identify healing plants even under the snow. She told him legends of her people as they lay side by side, watching the fire's shadows dance on the cave walls. One night, as a particularly fierce wind rattled the pine branches covering the cave entrance, Elias reached for her hand. "I've never met anyone like you, Nia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She could have pulled away. Should have, maybe. But instead, she let her fingers intertwine with his. "You probably haven't met many Apache healers," she said, trying to make light of the moment. "That's not what I mean, and you know it." His eyes were intense in the firelight. "You saved my life when you had every reason to let me die. You've shared your food, your shelter, your stories. Why?" Nia looked down at their joined hands. His, pale against her brown skin. "Maybe I was tired of losing things. Maybe I wanted to save something for once." Elias's other hand came up to gently touch her cheek. "I'm not worth saving, Nia. That's not for you to decide," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. When he kissed her, it was as gentle as snow falling on pine needles. Nia had been kissed before, but never like this, like she was something precious, something to be cherished. Her heart, which she had kept carefully guarded for so long, began to crack open. The storm finally broke after nearly a month. The morning sun sparkled on the fresh snow, turning the world into a dazzling white canvas. Nia stood at the cave entrance, breathing in the clean, cold air. "It's beautiful," Elias said, coming to stand beside her. His limp was almost gone now. "Yes," she agreed, "but dangerous still. The passes will be blocked for at least another week." He nodded, but there was a restlessness to him that hadn't been there before. His eyes kept drifting to the horizon, to the mountains beyond. That night, Elias was quiet, withdrawn. He kept touching the broken compass, turning it over and over in his hands. "What's wrong?" Nia finally asked. "Nothing," he said too quickly. Then, seeing her disbelieving look, he sighed. I've been in one place too long. It doesn't feel right." Nia felt as if a cold hand had gripped her heart. "You want to leave?" It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. "I need to. There are things I have to take care of. Things you're running from, you mean? Anger flashed in his eyes. You don't know anything about it. I know a man running when I see one, Nia said, her voice calm despite the hurt building inside her. And I know that running never solves anything. Maybe not, Elias admitted, the anger fading as quickly as it had come. But it's all I know how to do. Nia turned away from him, focusing on stirring the stew over the fire. The passes should be clear enough to travel in 3 days if you're determined to go. Nia? He reached for her, but she moved away. It's fine, Elias. I always knew you wouldn't stay. But it wasn't fine. For the first time in years, Nia had let someone past her defenses. She had begun to care, to hope. Foolish, she told herself. How many times had she seen promises broken? How many times had she been left behind? The next 3 days were strained. They spoke only when necessary, the easy companionship of the previous weeks gone. Nia spent more time outside the cave, checking her traps, gathering wood. Anything to avoid the look in Elias's eyes, a mixture of guilt and determination that told her his mind was made up. On what was to be their last night together, Nia returned from hunting to find Elias packing what few belongings he had. He had repaired his boots with strips of rabbit fur, and his coat was clean and mended where she had fixed it. The south pass should be clear by morning, she said, dropping. A pair of rabbits by the fire. Elias nodded, not meeting her eyes. I know, I checked it today. They ate in silence, the tension between them as solid as the stone walls of the cave. When the meal was done, Elias finally spoke. I want you to have this, he said, holding out the broken compass. Nia stared at it in surprise. But it was your mother's, and now it's yours. He pressed it into her hand, his fingers lingering against her palm. A reminder. Of what? The man who left. The words came out more bitter than she intended. Pain flashed across his face. Of the man whose life you saved, who will never forget you, Nia. She wanted to throw the compass back at him, to tell him she didn't want reminders or memories. She wanted him to stay. But pride kept her silent. She slipped the compass into the pouch at her waist and nodded once. Safe travels, Elias McCrae. He looked as if he wanted to say more, but in the end, he just nodded. Goodbye, Nia. That night, they slept on opposite sides of the fire for the first time since he had regained consciousness. Nia lay awake, listening to his breathing, memorizing the sound against her will. When dawn broke, Elias was already up, his few possessions packed. He stood awkwardly by the cave entrance as Nia stirred the fire to life. I left some jerky for your journey, she said, not looking at him, and filled your water skin. Thank you, he said softly, for everything. She nodded, still not meeting his gaze. If she looked at him now, she might ask him to stay, and she would not beg. Not ever again. Nia, just go, Elias, she cut him off. The day is wasting and you have far to travel. He hesitated a moment longer, then turned and limped out of the cave. Nia listened to the crunch of his boots on the snow, growing, fainter and fainter, until there was nothing but silence. Only then did she allow herself to look at the empty space where he had slept, at the cave that suddenly seemed so much larger and colder without him. Only then did she take out the broken compass and run her fingers over its cracked face, wondering which direction it would have pointed if it still worked. Not toward her, that much was certain. Nia was used to being left, by friends lost to raids, by promises broken by treaties, by a world that took without giving. But this hurt differently, because she had let herself believe, in the small smiles, the calloused hand that brushed hers by the fire, the way he watched her like she was the only thing still honest in the world. She buried the memory like all the rest, and moved on. Winter slowly released its grip on Painted Bluff. The snow began to melt, revealing patches of earth and early spring flowers. Nia packed up her winter shelter and made the journey back to her village, arriving just as the first green buds appeared on the trees. Life returned to its familiar rhythm. She tended to the sick, taught the young ones which plants could heal and which could harm, joined the hunting parties. If she sometimes found herself scanning the horizon or touching the broken compass she now wore on a leather cord around her neck, no one noticed but her. Spring came in full force, turning the canyons green and filling the streams with fresh, cold water. Nia was collecting herbs by the river when she heard it, the distant thunder of hooves, many hooves. Her first thought was raiders, and she quickly gathered her things, preparing to run back to the village and sound the alarm. But as the sound grew closer, she realized it was coming from the wrong direction, not from the settlements, but from the wildlands to the east. Curiosity overcame caution, and Nia climbed a small rise to get a better view. In the distance, she could make out a line of horses, 20 or more, kicking up dust as they moved, steadily toward the village. Leading them was a lone rider, his hat pulled low against the sun. There was something familiar about the set of his shoulders, the way he sat in the saddle. Nia's heart began to pound against her ribs, like a trapped bird. It couldn't be. And yet, she ran, her feet flying over the familiar path back to the village. By the time she arrived, breathless and flushed, a crowd had already gathered at the edge of the settlement. Everyone was staring at the approaching horses. 20 of them she could now see, each one strong and healthy, and leading them, like a ghost with a pulse, was Elias McCrae. He rode straight into the center of the village, ignoring the suspicious looks and murmured comments from the Apache gathered around. His eyes searched the crowd until they found Nia, standing frozen at the back. The whole village watched as Elias dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate. He looked different somehow. His hair was shorter, his clothes newer, but it was the look in his eyes that had changed the most. The haunted, restless look was gone, replaced by something clear and determined. He walked straight to Nia, removed his hat and knelt before her in the dust. "I left because I was afraid you'd see me for what I was. A man who's lost more than he's earned," he said, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. "But I came back with everything I have." Then he held up a small object, a ring, hand-carved from dark wood, polished to a soft sheen. "And I came to ask, would you make a life with me if I promised to never run again?" Nia stared down at him, at the man who had left her without a goodbye, who had now returned with 20 horses and a carved ring. She was aware of the entire village watching, waiting for her answer. She said nothing for a long while, her face unreadable. Then finally, "I don't want your horses, Elias." His shoulders slumped, and he lowered his gaze. "I know. But I'll take the ring," she continued, causing his head to snap up in surprise. "And the truth. And you, if you mean to stay when winter comes again." Hope bloomed on Elias's face, bright as the spring flowers covering the canyons. "I never learned how to stay," he admitted, "but I'll learn with you." Nia extended her hand, and Elias rose to his feet, slipping the wooden ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if he had memorized the shape of her hand during those long winter nights by the fire. Around them, the village erupted in a mixture of reactions, some approving, others suspicious, most simply stunned by the unexpected drama unfolding before them. But Nia and Elias noticed none of it. For them, there was only the look passing between them, a promise, unspoken but binding, a promise of truth, a promise of staying, a promise as strong as 20 horses and as fragile as a wooden ring. The news of Nia's engagement to a white man spread through the village like wildfire. By nightfall, everyone from the youngest child to the oldest elder had something to say about it. Some were curious, others concerned, and a few were openly hostile. Chief Nakohe, the leader of their band, called for Nia and Elias to meet with the Council of Elders that very evening. As the sun set over Painted Bluff, casting long shadows across the village, Nia led Elias to the large central lodge where the elders waited. "They won't make this easy for you," she warned him as they approached. "Or for me." Elias nodded, his face serious. "I don't expect them to. I wouldn't in their place." Inside the lodge, 8 elders sat in a semicircle around a central fire. Chief Nakohe, a man in his 60s, with a deeply lined face and watchful eyes, motioned for them to sit across from him. "Nia, daughter of our people," he began in their language, "you have accepted a proposal from this man, this stranger." "I have," Nia replied, keeping her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. The chief switched to English, fixing his penetrating gaze on Elias. "And you, white man, You bring horses and a ring and think that is enough to claim one of our own? Elias met the chief's gaze without flinching. No, sir. I know it's not enough. The horses are a gift to your village, not a payment for Nia. She can't be bought, not with 20 horses or 20,000. I came back because I love her and I aim to prove I'm worthy of her, if you'll give me that chance. A murmur went through the elders at his words. One of them, an older woman named Casa, who had been like a second grandmother to Nia, spoke up. Love is a big word from a man who left once already, she said, her voice sharp but not unkind. How do we know you won't leave again when things get difficult? It was the question Nia herself had been afraid to ask. She held her breath, waiting for Elias's answer. You don't, he said simply. I can make all the promises in the world, but they're just words until I back them up. All I'm asking is time to show you, to show all of you, that I mean what I say. Chief Nakohe considered this, the firelight casting deep shadows across his weathered face. Words are wind, he finally said. Actions are stone. We will watch your actions, Elias McCrae. That's all I ask, Elias replied. The chief nodded once. You may stay in the village. The horses will be accepted as a gift to all our people. But know this, if you break Nia's heart, you break faith with all of us. I understand, Elias said solemnly. Then it is decided, the chief declared. You will have until the next full moon to begin proving yourself. If by then the council agrees you are sincere, you may continue your courtship according to our customs. Nia released the breath she'd been holding. It wasn't an outright acceptance, but it was a start, more than she had dared hope for. As they left the lodge, the night air cool on their faces, Elias took her hand. 1 month, he said, to convince them I'm not just another white man with empty promises. It won't be easy, Nia warned him. There's a lot of history, a lot of broken trust. I know. His fingers tightened around hers. But there's something you should know about me, Nia. I'm stubborn as a mule when I set my mind to something, and right now my mind is set on spending the rest of my life with you. Despite her lingering doubts, Nia felt a smile tug at her lips. Stubborn is good, she said. You're going to need it. The next morning, Elias was up before dawn. Nia found him outside the small guest lodge, where he had been given permission to stay, already hard at work splitting firewood for the communal cooking fires. You don't have to do that, she said, watching as he swung the axe with practiced ease. I know, he replied, not stopping, but I want to. I've been living off your kindness for too long already. Time I started pulling my weight. By midday, he had split enough wood to last the village several days. Without pausing to rest, he moved on to helping repair a section of fence around the horse corral that had been damaged in a recent storm. Several of the younger men watched him suspiciously at first, but when he asked for their help in showing him the proper way to secure the posts, a few reluctantly stepped forward. Elias worked alongside them without complaint, following their instructions carefully, offering suggestions only when asked. By the end of the day, he had blisters on his hands and dirt smudged across his face, but the fence was repaired, and he had earned, if not the friendship of the young men, at least a measure of grudging respect. Day after day, Elias found ways to make himself useful around the village. He dug irrigation trenches to bring water from the stream to the gardens. He helped repair lodges damaged by winter storms. He carried water for the elderly, chopped wood for cooking fires, and never once complained about the hard work or the suspicious glances still cast his way by many villagers. In the evenings, he would sit with Nia by the fire outside her lodge, telling her about his day, asking about hers. Their time together was never private. Always there were curious eyes watching, ears listening, but they treasured it nonetheless. Why did you bring so many horses? Nia asked him one evening 2 weeks after his return. 20 is a lot, even as a gift to the village. Elias smiled, his face softened by the firelight. Remember I told you I had to take care of some things? Well, one of those things was a debt I owed. A man in Texas gave me a chance when no one else would, hired me to break horses on his ranch. I repaid him by stealing from him when times got tough. Nia's eyes widened in surprise. You stole those horses? No, Elias said quickly. No, these aren't the ones I took. After I left you, I tracked down the man I'd wronged, turned myself in, confessed what I'd done. I expected him to have me arrested, but instead he offered me a job, breaking and training 20 wild Mustangs he'd recently acquired. Said if I could do it by spring, he'd consider my debt paid. And you did it, Nia said softly. Elias nodded. I did. Every day from dawn till dusk I worked with those horses. Some were easier than others. That roan mare with the white star. He pointed to one of the horses grazing nearby. She nearly killed me twice before she decided I was worth listening to. Like someone else I know, Nia said with a small smile. Elias laughed. Maybe that's why I have a soft spot for her. Anyway, when the job was done, the rancher offered to buy the horses from me, said he had a buyer lined up who'd pay top dollar. But I told him I had other plans for them. And he just let you take them? He did. Elias's expression grew serious. Said a man who'd worked that hard to right a wrong deserved a second chance. I'd never had anyone believe in me like that before. His eyes met hers. Well, almost never. Nia felt her cheeks warm at the intensity of his gaze. You've changed, she said. I had to, he replied simply. The man I was before wasn't good enough for you. Little by little, day by day, Elias began to earn his place in the village. It wasn't just the physical labor, though there was plenty of that. It was the respect he showed to the elders, always listening more than he spoke. It was the patience he displayed with the children who followed him around, curious about the white man who wanted to marry their Nia. But most of all, it was the way he treated Nia herself, with a tenderness and respect that everyone could see was genuine. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, never assumed rights he hadn't earned, never took for granted the second chance she had offered him. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after Elias's return, Nia was teaching a group of children which plants could be used for medicine when she noticed a small crowd gathering near the horse corral. Curious, she dismissed her young students early and went to see what was happening. She found Elias in the center of the corral with 3 young boys teaching them how to approach a horse properly. The boys, who couldn't have been more than 10 or 11, watched with wide-eyed fascination as Elias demonstrated how to stand, how to speak, how to offer a hand for the horse to smell. Easy now, he was saying to little Fox, the youngest of the 3. Let him come to you, that's it. Horses can sense fear, but they can also sense kindness. Show him you mean no harm. Little Fox stood perfectly still, his small hand extended as one of the gentler horses Elias had brought, a dappled grey gelding, cautiously approached. When the horse finally nudged the boy's palm with its velvety nose, little Fox's face broke into a delighted grin. I did it, he exclaimed. Did you see, Nia? The horse likes me. I see, she said, smiling at the boy's excitement. You're a natural. Elias looked up at the sound of her voice, and the smile he gave her made her heart skip a beat. There was such pride in his eyes, not for himself but for the boy's accomplishment. Later, as they walked back toward the village together, Nia asked, How did you end up giving riding lessons? Little Fox asked, Elias said with a shrug. Said he'd always wanted to learn but was afraid of the bigger horses. Figured I could at least show him how to make friends with them first. Their parents approved? Nia was surprised. Little Fox's father in particular had been one of the more vocal critics of Elias's presence in the village. Not at first, Elias admitted, but I asked the chief's permission and he gave it, said learning to ride properly was a valuable skill for any Apache. The parents came around eventually, especially when I offered to let them supervise the lessons. Nia shook her head in amazement. You're full of surprises, Elias McCrae. He grinned. Got to keep you on your toes somehow. The next day, Nia was mixing healing salves in her lodge when a shadow fell across the doorway. She looked up to find Casa, the elder who had questioned Elias at the council meeting, standing there. May I come in? The older woman asked. Of course, Nia said, setting aside her work. Casa was not only an elder, but had been her grandmother's closest friend. After her grandmother's death, Casa had taken it upon herself to look after Nia, offering advice whether Nia wanted it or not. Casa lowered herself carefully onto a sitting mat, her old joints creaking in protest. So, she said without preamble, this white man of yours, he is still here. He is, Nia agreed cautiously. And you still want him? I do. Casa studied her face for a long moment. He works hard, she finally said. Harder than some of our own young men. And he is respectful. Yes, Nia said, hope rising in her chest. He is. But he is still white, Casa pointed out. His people have done much harm to ours. He is not his people, Nia said firmly. Just as I am not mine. We are ourselves, Casa. The older woman sighed heavily. You sound like your grandmother. She was stubborn too. There was a note of fondness in the criticism. The council meets tonight to decide if your cowboy may stay longer. I thought you should know that I will speak for him. Nia's eyes widened in surprise. You will? Don't look so shocked, Casa said with a hint of a smile. I am old, not blind. I see how he looks at you, like you are the sun and he has been too long in darkness. And I see how you look at him, like you have found something you thought was lost forever. And that's enough for you? Nia asked softly. No, Casa admitted. But it is a start. The rest will come with time. If he is truly the man you believe him to be. That evening, Nia waited anxiously outside the council lodge while the elders deliberated. Elias sat beside her, his face calm but his hands betraying his nervousness as they repeatedly smoothed down his already neat hair. Whatever they decide, he said quietly, I'm not leaving you again. Even if they say no, I'll build a cabin just outside tribal lands. We'll find a way. Nia reached for his hand, stilling its restless movement. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. After what seemed like hours, Chief Nakohe emerged from the lodge and beckoned them inside. The elders' faces were unreadable as Nia and Elias took their places before the council. Elias McCrae, the chief began formally, we have watched you these past weeks. We have seen your actions and judged your heart. Elias straightened his shoulders, preparing himself for their decision. It is the judgment of this council, the chief continued, that you have shown yourself to be a man of your word. You may continue your courtship of Nia, according to our customs, with the blessing of the elders. Relief washed over Nia like a cool stream on a hot day. Beside her, she felt Elias release the breath he'd been holding. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I won't let you down. See that you don't, the chief replied. But there was a glint of approval in his eyes that hadn't been there before. As spring turned to summer, Elias's position in the village grew more secure. He was still an outsider in many ways, but no longer unwelcome. The horses he had brought proved to be valuable additions to the village's herd, strong, well-trained animals that could work or be traded as needed. And his skills as a horseman were increasingly respected, especially by the younger generation who eagerly sought his lessons. But it was his relationship with Nia that truly blossomed in those warm summer months. Following Apache custom, they spent time together daily, but always in the company of others, often Casa, who had appointed herself their unofficial chaperone. They worked side by side in the gardens, joined hunting parties together, and in the evenings sat by the community fire, their shoulders touching as they listened to the elders tell stories of the old days. During one such evening, as the stars began to appear in the deepening twilight, Elias surprised everyone by asking if he might share a story of his own. It is a story my mother told me, he explained, passed down from her mother, who heard it from a Cherokee woman she once sheltered during a storm. The elders exchanged glances, then Chief Nakohe nodded his permission. We would hear your story, Elias McCrae. And so Elias told the tale of a great eagle who fell in love with a wolf, two creatures of different worlds who found a way to be together despite the odds against them. His voice rose and fell with the rhythm of the story, painting pictures with words just as the Apache storytellers did. When he finished, there was a moment of appreciative silence before the murmurs of approval began. You tell stories well for a white man, one of the elders said, which from him was high praise indeed. Elias grinned. Thank you. My mother always said I had the gift of gab. Never thought it would come in handy quite like this. Later, as they walked back toward Nia's lodge with Casa a discreet distance behind them, Nia asked, Was that really a Cherokee story? Parts of it, Elias admitted. My mother did hear it from a Cherokee woman, but I may have embellished it a bit. Naya laughed. The eagle and the wolf, that was subtle. Subtle isn't really my strong suit, Elias said, his eyes twinkling in the moonlight. But the point stands. Different worlds don't have to mean impossible love. No, Naya agreed softly. They don't. As summer progressed, so did plans for their wedding. According to Apache tradition, they would be married under the first full moon of autumn, when the weather was still warm, but the harvests were mostly complete. There were many preparations to be made. A new lodge to be built, gifts to be exchanged, ceremonies to be planned. Elias threw himself into these preparations with the same determination he had shown in earning the village's trust. He worked with the men to build a lodge for himself and Nia, learning the traditional methods while contributing ideas from his own experience. He hunted with the village's best trackers, bringing back deer and elk to be dried for winter provisions. And he spent hours with the elders, learning the language and customs of his soon-to-be people. Not everyone in the village was happy about the upcoming marriage. There were still those who viewed Elias with suspicion, who whispered that no white man could truly be trusted. Among them was Takoda, a young warrior who had once hoped to court Nia himself. Tall and handsome, with a proud bearing and impressive hunting skills, Takoda made no secret of his disapproval. He will leave when winter comes, he told Naya one day, as they worked together collecting berries. Or when the first child cries too much in the night. Or when the army comes looking for white settlers to join their fight against our people, then where will you be? You don't know him, Nia replied calmly, though the words stung because they echoed her own deepest fears. I know his kind, Takoda insisted. They make promises they never intend to keep. Elias is different. So you say now. Takoda's voice softened. It's not too late, Naya. There are men of your own people who would be proud to call you wife. Men like you? Nia asked directly. Takoda didn't deny it. I have always admired you, you know this. And I have always valued your friendship, Nia said gently but firmly. But my heart belongs to Elias now. Takoda's expression hardened. Then you are a fool. And when he breaks your heart, do not come seeking comfort from me. He stalked away, leaving Naya staring after him with a mixture of sadness and frustration. She had hoped that over time Takoda would accept her choice, but it seemed he was determined to hold on to his resentment. That evening, she told Elias about the encounter, careful to leave out Takoda's hurtful predictions about Elias leaving. He's in love with you, Elias said simply. Can't say I blame him. He's angry, Nia corrected, and he doesn't trust you. Again, can't blame him. Elias ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Nia had come to recognize as a sign of his unease. If I were in his shoes watching the woman I loved choose an outsider, I'd probably feel the same way. So what do we do? Nia asked. Nothing, Elias said. Except prove him wrong day after day, year after year. Words won't convince him. Naya, only time will. She nodded, once again struck by how much Elias had changed from the restless, running man she had found in the snow. This new Elias thought in terms of years, not days. He spoke of the future as something to build, not escape from. You're right, she said. Time will show what's true. As summer began to wane and the first hints of autumn touched the trees with gold, preparations for the wedding intensified. According to tradition, Naya spent more time with the women of the village, learning the specific skills she would need as a wife. Not that she didn't already know most of them, but tradition was tradition. Elias, meanwhile, was expected to prove his ability to provide for his bride by bringing back game from a special hunting trip. He rode out with a group of men from the village, including, to his surprise, Takoda. The chief asked me to guide you to the best hunting grounds, Takoda explained stiffly, when Elias questioned his presence. I do as my chief commands. The hunting trip was meant to last 3 days. When 5 days passed with no sign of the men, Nia began to worry. By the 7th day, her worry had turned to fear. Something's wrong, she told Casa, as they sat outside her lodge working on the wedding blanket that would cover her and Elias on their first night together. They should have been back by now. Hunting trips sometimes take longer than expected, Casa said calmly, though her eyes betrayed her own concern. The game may have been scarce, or they may have gone farther than planned. Or something happened to them, Nia said, voicing her deepest fear. To him. Casa reached over to pat her. And Elias McCrae is not an easy man to kill, I think. He survived a winter storm that would have taken most men. And he has good hunters with him, including Takoda, who hates him, Nia pointed out. Casa's eyes sharpened. Takoda is many things. Proud, stubborn, sometimes foolish. But he is not dishonorable. He would not harm a hunting companion, no matter his personal feelings. Nia wanted to believe that, but as the day wore on with no sign of the hunting party, her fears only grew. She found herself touching the wooden ring Elias had carved for her, rubbing it like a talisman. Please come back to me, she thought. Please don't let me lose you now. As the sun began to set on the 7th day, Nia was at the edge of the village, staring at the trail that led into the eastern hills, willing Elias to appear. And then, as if her thoughts had summoned him, she saw movement on the horizon, riders, several of them, moving slowly toward the village. Her heart leapt, then faltered as she realized something was wrong. The men were riding too slowly, and one horse appeared to be carrying double. She ran toward them, fear propelling her faster than she had ever moved before. As she drew closer, she could make out Takoda in the lead, his face grim. Behind him rode 2 other hunters from the village, and behind them, on a horse that was clearly struggling with the extra weight, was Elias, slumped forward in the saddle, his arm around another rider who seemed to be holding him in place. Elias, Nia cried, reaching the party just as they entered the village. What happened? It was Takoda who answered, his voice clipped. Rockslide. His horse was spooked, through him. He hit his head and has been drifting in and out of consciousness ever since. Get him to my lodge, Nia commanded, her healer's instincts taking over. Carefully, they carried Elias to her lodge and laid him on her sleeping furs. His face was pale beneath his tan, and a nasty gash ran along his hairline crusted with dried blood. Leave us, Nia told the men. I need to examine him. They filed out, but Takoda lingered at the doorway. He saved 2 bears, he said abruptly. The rockslide would have buried him, but your cowboy pushed him out of the way. That's how he got caught in it himself. Nia looked up in surprise. He did? Takoda nodded, his expression conflicted. It was a brave thing to do. He hesitated, then added grudgingly, He is not what I expected, your white man. Before Nia could respond, he turned and left, leaving her alone with Elias. She quickly gathered her healing supplies and set to work cleaning the wound on his head. It was deep, but not as bad as she had feared. The real concern was the concussion. He had clearly suffered. As she worked, Elias's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then clearing as they found her face. Nia, he murmured, reaching for her hand. You're here. Where else would I be? She asked, relief making her voice sharper than she intended. A small smile tugged at his lips. Thought I might be dreaming again. Used to dream about you in that cave. This isn't a dream, she assured him, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. You're home, Elias. Home, he repeated, as if testing the word. Yes, with you. That's home now. Nia felt tears sting her eyes. You scared me, she admitted. When I saw you slumped over like that. Sorry about that, he said, wincing as he tried to sit up. Not how I planned for the hunting trip to go. Did we at least get some game? Can't come back empty-handed before my wedding. Lie still, Nia ordered, gently pushing him back down. And yes, the others got plenty of game. You're the only one who came back injured. Always have to be special, Elias joked weakly. Nia shook her head, but she was smiling through her tears now. Takoda told me what you did, how you saved 2 bears. Elias looked uncomfortable. Didn't really think about it. Just saw the rocks. Coming down and reacted. You could have been killed, but I wasn't. His hand found hers, squeezing gently. Takes more than a few rocks to keep me from my wedding day. Nia leaned down to press her forehead against his, a gesture of intimacy allowed even before marriage. Just don't do it again, she whispered. I can't lose you now, Elias McCrae. Not when you've finally learned how to stay. His hand came up to cup her cheek. I'm not going anywhere, he promised, except to the altar with you as soon as my head stops pounding. Outside the lodge, the village buzzed with news of the hunting party's return and Elias's injury, but more significant was the story of his bravery, which spread quickly from lodge to lodge. By morning, even those who had been most skeptical of the white man's intentions had to admit that a man who would risk his life for one of their own deserved their respect. And Takoda, much to everyone's surprise, was among the first to publicly declare that Elias McCrae had earned his place among them, not just as Naya's husband, but as a brother to the Apache. The wedding was postponed by 2 weeks to allow Elias time to recover, but as the first full moon of autumn finally rose over Painted Bluff, casting its silver light over the canyons, Nia and Elias stood together before the entire village, ready to speak the vows that would bind them as husband and wife. Elias had insisted on wearing traditional Apache clothing for the ceremony, and Nia had to admit he looked handsome in the buckskin shirt and leggings that had been a gift from Chief Nakohe himself. Her own dress, decorated with intricate beadwork that she and Kasa had spent weeks creating, glittered in the firelight as she took Elias's hands in hers. Under this moon, before these witnesses, Chief Nakohe intoned, Nia and Elias McCrae seek to join their lives as one. Who speaks for this union? Kasa stepped forward first. I speak for Nia, daughter of our people, healer and tracker. She has chosen with her heart and her head, and I give my blessing. To everyone's shock, it was Takoda who stepped forward next. I speak for Elias McCrae, who has proven himself a man of courage and honor. Though he comes from another world, he has found his home among us. I give my blessing. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the gathered crowd, but Nia had eyes only for Elias, whose face reflected the same joy and wonder she felt in her own heart. The blessings are given, Chief Nakohe declared. Now speak your promises to each other. Elias spoke first, his voice clear and strong in the night air. Nia, I came to you lost and broken, and you saved more than my life. You saved my soul. I promise to stand beside you through all seasons, to share your joys and sorrows, to honor your people as my own, and to never again run from what matters most. With this ring, he touched the wooden band on her finger, I pledge my life to yours. Nia's voice trembled slightly as she responded, Elias, I found you in the snow and brought you to my fire, never knowing you would kindle a flame in my heart that will never die. I promise to walk with you on whatever path life brings us, to trust in your strength as you trust in mine, to make a home with you that will shelter us both in storm and sunshine. With this ring, I accept your life as part of mine now and always. 2 paths have become one, Chief Nakohe said, wrapping a beautifully woven blanket around their shoulders, binding them together. 2 hearts have become one. 2 lives have become one. What the Creator has joined, let no one tear asunder. The village erupted in cheers and ululations as Elias gathered Naya into his arms for their first kiss as husband and wife. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, feasting, and storytelling. And through it all, Elias never let go of Nia's hand, as if afraid she might disappear if he released her even for a moment. Later, much later, when they were finally alone in their new lodge, wrapped in the wedding blanket and each other's arms, Elias traced the curve of Nia's cheek with gentle fingers. Mrs. McCrae, he said softly, testing the sound of it. Nia smiled. It sounds strange. Good strange or bad strange? Just strange, she said. But I'll get used to it. We have a lifetime for that, Elias reminded her, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Nia nestled closer to him, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. A lifetime, she repeated. I like the sound of that even better. Outside their lodge, the moon sailed across the star-filled sky, casting its gentle light over Painted Bluff. The 20 horses Elias had brought grazed peacefully in the corral, no longer a bride price but a symbol of a promise kept. And in their new home, the healer and the cowboy began the first night of a journey that neither of them had expected, but both had chosen with their whole hearts. But as they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, neither of them knew that their greatest challenge was yet to come, a challenge that would test not only their love, but the very promises they had just made to each other. Autumn painted Painted Bluff in rich golds and deep reds as Elias and Nia settled into married life. Their days fell into a comfortable rhythm, rising with the sun, working alongside the rest of the village during daylight hours, and spending their evenings together in their cozy lodge, planning for the future. "I'm thinking we should expand the irrigation system before winter," Elias said one evening as they sat by their fire, sharing a meal of rabbit stew. "The eastern fields didn't get enough water during the dry spell last month." Nia smiled at him over her bowl. "You sound more like one of the elders every day." "Is that a bad thing?" Elias asked, raising an eyebrow. "No," she assured him, reaching across to touch his hand. "It's good. It means you're thinking ahead, putting down roots." "Well, that's what trees do when they plan to stay somewhere," he said with a grin, "and I'm definitely staying." In the 2 months since their wedding, Elias had truly become part of the village. He no longer felt like an outsider looking in, but a member of the community with responsibilities and a voice in decisions. The fact that he was white still mattered to some, but less and less as time went on. What mattered more was that he worked hard, kept his promises, and treated Nia with love and respect that everyone could see. He had even begun to learn the Apache language, practicing with Casa and the other elders in the evenings. His pronunciation made the children giggle, but his determination impressed their parents. "Soon you'll be dreaming in Apache," Nia teased him, after he'd spent an entire evening struggling with particularly difficult phrases. "I already dream in it sometimes," he admitted, "though I'm not sure if I'm saying things right even in my dreams." One crisp morning in late autumn, Elias was working with several men from the village to repair the roof of the storage lodge before the winter. Snows came. He was balanced on the peak of the roof, securing a beam, when he spotted a rider approaching from the direction of the nearest white settlement, a small town called Miller's Creek, about 30 miles away. Visitors from town were rare, especially this late in the season when travel was becoming more difficult. Elias watched the rider with curiosity that slowly turned to unease as the man drew closer. There was something familiar about the way he sat in the saddle, straight-backed and formal. Elias, one of the men working beside him, asked, noticing his distraction, "Is something wrong?" "Not sure," Elias said slowly. "Think I'll go see who our visitor is." By the time Elias climbed down from the roof, the rider had reached the edge of the village and was speaking with Chief Nakohe. As Elias approached, he got a clear look at the man's face and felt his stomach drop. It was Sheriff Taylor from Miller's Creek, a man Elias had deliberately avoided during his few trips to town. "McCrae," the sheriff said, his eyes narrowing, as he spotted Elias. "Thought that might be you the locals were talking about. Been wondering where you'd gotten to." "Sheriff," Elias acknowledged with a nod, trying to keep his voice casual despite the cold knot of dread forming in his gut. "What brings you all the way out here?" The sheriff reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. "Got something with your name on it." Chief Nakohe looked between the two men, his weathered face revealing nothing. "You know this man, Elias?" "We've met," Elias said carefully. "Sheriff Taylor is the law in Miller's Creek." The sheriff handed the folded paper to Elias. "Got this by telegraph last week. Came all the way from Texas." With a sense of impending doom, Elias unfolded the paper. It was a warrant for his arrest, charging him with theft and destruction of property. The complainant was James Mercer, a Saidida name that made Elias's blood run cold. "This is a mistake," he said, looking up at the sheriff. "I settled things with Mercer before I left Texas. He agreed the debt was paid." Sheriff Taylor shrugged. "Can't speak to that. All I know is that warrant's legal and I'm obliged to bring you in." "Bring him in where?" Nia's voice came from behind Elias. He turned to find her standing there, her face a mask of confusion and growing alarm. "Ma'am," the sheriff acknowledged with a tip of his hat, "I need to take your husband to Miller's Creek. From there, he'll be transferred to the territorial capital to await extradition to Texas." "On what charges?" Nia demanded, moving to stand beside Elias. "Theft and property destruction," the sheriff repeated. "Pretty serious charges, ma'am." "Let me see that," Nia said, taking the warrant from Elias's nerveless fingers. Her eyes scanned the document, widening as she took in the details. "This says you stole horses and burned down a barn." "I didn't," Elias said firmly. I took 2. Horses, yes, and I shouldn't have. But I went back and made it right. Worked off my debt fair and square, and I never burned anything. The sheriff looked skeptical. That'll be for a judge to decide. Now, are you coming peacefully, or do I need to make this difficult? Chief Nakohe, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. You come alone to our village to take one of our people. That seems unwise, Sheriff. The implied threat wasn't lost on Sheriff Taylor, whose hand drifted toward his gun. I'm just doing my job, Chief. The law's the law. And justice is justice, the chief replied. What proof do you have that these accusations are true? The T. Warrant is proof enough for me to make an arrest, the sheriff said. Beyond that, it's not my concern. Elias placed a restraining hand on the chief's arm. It's all right, he said quietly. I'll go with him. Elias, no, Nia protested. You can't just... I have to. Elias cut her off gently. If I run, they'll just keep looking. And next time, they might bring more than one sheriff. He looked around at the village, at the women and children watching from the doorways of their lodges. I won't risk bringing trouble to your people. Our people, Nia corrected fiercely. And you're innocent. You said so yourself. I am, Elias agreed. Of burning the barn, at least. And I made things right about the horses, but running won't prove that. The sheriff cleared his throat impatiently. Need to get moving if we want to make it to town before dark. Elias nodded. Let me get my things and say goodbye to my wife. The sheriff hesitated, then gave a curt nod. Make it quick. Inside their lodge, Elias quickly gathered a few necessities while Nia watched, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. This is wrong, she said, her voice shaking with anger and fear. You can't just go with him. I don't have a choice, Nia, Elias said, pausing to take her hands in his. If I run, it only makes me look guilty, and they'll come looking for me here first. Then we'll both run, she suggested desperately. Go somewhere they can't find. Us? Elias shook his head. And live like that, always looking over our shoulders? That's no life for either of us. He squeezed her hands. Besides, I'm innocent, at least of burning that barn. Once I get to Texas, I can prove it. How? Nia demanded. Mercer knows the truth, Elias said with more confidence than he felt. He agreed the debt was paid. Something else must be going on here. Nia's eyes searched his face. There's something you're not telling me, Elias sighed, knowing he couldn't hide anything from her. Mercer has a daughter, Clara. Before I left, she took an interest in me. What kind of interest? Nia asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Not on my part, Elias hastened to assure her, but she was persistent. When I told her I was leaving, she didn't take it well. Threatened to tell her. Father, all sorts of things. And you didn't think this was worth mentioning before now? Nia's eyes flashed with hurt. It didn't seem important, Elias said. I never gave her any reason to think I returned her feelings, and when Mercer let me go with the horses, I thought that was the end of it. Clearly it wasn't, Nia said bitterly. Elias pulled her into his arms, relief flooding through him when she didn't resist. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I should have told you everything. Yes, you should have, she agreed, her voice muffled against his chest. Then she pulled back to look up at him. But that doesn't change anything. You're still innocent, and I'm still not letting you face this alone. Nia, I'm coming with you, she said with a firmness that brooked no argument. To Miller's Creek, to the territorial capital, to Texas if necessary. Wherever you go, I go. That was the promise we made. Elias knew better than to argue when Nia had that look in her eyes. And truthfully, the thought of facing what lay ahead without her by his side was more than he could bear. All right, he conceded. But it won't be easy or comfortable. Neither was dragging you through a snowstorm, she reminded him with the ghost of a smile. I'm tougher than I look, Cowboy. When they emerged from their lodge, Elias with his small pack and Nia similarly equipped, the sheriff frowned. The warrant's just for him, he said, nodding at Elias. I'm his wife, Nia replied simply. Where he goes, I go. The sheriff looked like he wanted to argue, but thought better of it when he saw the determined set of Nia's jaw. Suit yourself, but we're still leaving now. To their surprise, they found Chief Nakohe and several other members of the tribe, including Takoda, waiting for them with horses already saddled. You did not think we would let you face this alone, the chief asked, noting their surprised expressions. The council has decided, he continued. Dakota and Two Bears will accompany you to this Miller's Creek. They will witness what happens and bring back word if you are taken further. I can't ask you to do that, Elias began, but Dakota cut him off. You didn't ask. We decided. The young warrior's face was set in determined lines. You are one of us now, McCrae. We do not abandon our own. Elias felt a lump form in his throat at the unexpected show of solidarity. Thank you, he managed. The sheriff looked distinctly uncomfortable with this turn of events, but wasn't foolish enough to object to an armed escort through Apache territory. As they prepared to leave, Casa approached Nia and pressed a small leather pouch into her hand. Herbs, she explained. For strength and clear thinking, you will need both in the days ahead. Thank you, Nia said, embracing the older woman. Bring him home, Casa whispered in her ear. Our village needs you both. The journey to Miller's Creek was tense and largely silent. The sheriff rode in front, with Elias and Nia behind him, and Dakota and Two Bears bringing up the rear, a position that allowed them to keep an eye on everyone, particularly the sheriff. What do you know about this James Mercer? Nia asked Elias quietly as they rode. He owns one of the biggest ranches in West Texas, Elias replied. Tough, but fair. At least he was with me. Let me work off what I owed him instead of pressing. Charges the first time around, that's why this doesn't make sense. And his daughter, Clara? Elias sighed, knowing he needed to tell Nia everything now. She's his only child. Spoiled, used to getting her way. When I started working at the ranch, she decided she wanted me. And you? Nia pressed. I was polite but kept my distance, Elias said firmly. I was there to work, to make things right, nothing more. But she didn't see it that way. No. The day before I left, she cornered me in the stables, tried to persuade me to stay. Elias's jaw tightened at the memory. When I turned her down, she got angry, said I'd regret it. And you think she's behind this warrant? Nia asked, the pieces falling into place. It would explain why Mercer is suddenly claiming I burned down his barn when he knew I didn't. Elias said. Clara could have convinced him somehow. Then we need to get to Texas, Nia concluded. Confront them both with the truth. Elias gave her a sidelong look. It won't be that simple. Mercer's powerful in those parts. His word carries a lot of weight. So does the truth, Nia insisted, and we have that on our side. They reached Miller's Creek just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the dusty main street. It was a small town, just a handful of buildings clustered around a crossroads, a general store, a saloon, a small church, and at the end of the street, the sheriff's office and jail. The arrival of their unusual party drew curious stares from the few townspeople still out and about. The sight of two Apache warriors riding openly into town was unusual enough, but add to that, the sheriff escorting a white man and an Apache woman, and it was enough to bring the local gossips out onto their porches. Word will spread fast, the sheriff warned as they dismounted in front of the jail. Folks around here aren't used to seeing Indians in town, especially not armed ones. We go where we please on our own lands, Dakota said coldly. This town sits on Apache territory, whether you acknowledge it or not. The sheriff wisely chose not to argue the point. You two can make camp outside town, he told Dakota and Two Bears. The prisoner stays in the jail. And his wife? Dakota challenged. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. There's no accommodation for women in the jail. Then I'll stay at the boarding house, Nia said. If there is one. Mrs. Leary's place down the street, the sheriff admitted reluctantly. But I don't know if she'll take an Indian, Nia finished for him. We'll see about that. Before the sheriff could respond, the door of the jail swung open, and a tall man in an expensive suit stepped out. His hair was silver at the temples, and his face bore the weathered look of someone who spent time outdoors despite his fine clothes. His cold blue eyes fixed on Elias with a look of satisfaction. Well, well, he drawled. If it isn't the horse thief himself. Elias stiffened. Mercer, didn't expect to see you here. James Mercer smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. Couldn't very well trust local law enforcement to handle such an important matter. Had to come supervise personally. His gaze shifted to Nia, and his smile faded. "And who might this be?" "My wife," Elias said, moving slightly to stand between Nia and Mercer's scrutiny. Nia McCrae. Surprise flickered across Mercer's face, followed quickly by something harder to read. "You married an Indian? Well, that explains why you were so eager to leave Texas, doesn't it?" "I didn't even know Nia when I left your ranch," Elias said. "And you know very well I didn't burn any barn. We settled our accounts fair and square, did he?" "We?" Mercer's voice was dangerously soft. "Because from where I stand you took advantage of my hospitality, stole from me, and then fled like a coward." "That's not true, and you know it," Elias retorted, anger beginning to replace his initial shock. "I worked off every cent I owed you, and yet my barn still burned to the ground the night you left," Mercer countered, "with 2 prize stallions inside. Quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say, Sheriff?" Sheriff Taylor nodded, though he looked less certain than before. "Mighty suspicious timing, for sure. I was 30 miles away by the time that barn could have burned," Elias argued. "And you never mentioned any fire when I brought back the horses." "Perhaps I was gathering evidence," Mercer suggested smoothly, "making sure of my facts before making accusations." "Or perhaps you're lying," Nia interjected, her voice calm but steely. "For reasons of your own." Mercer's eyes narrowed as he turned his attention back to her. "You'd be wise to watch your tongue, woman. Your husband is facing serious charges. Charges that could see him hang if a jury decides against him." Nia didn't flinch under his gaze. "Threats won't change the truth, Mr. Mercer. And the truth is, my husband made restitution for the horses he took. Whatever happened to your barn, he had nothing to do with it." "That'll be for a judge to decide," the sheriff cut in, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. "Now I need to get the prisoner secured for the night. The circuit judge won't be through for another 3 days." 3 days, Elias repeated. "I thought you said I was being transferred to the territorial capital." "Change of plans," Mercer said with a thin smile. "I persuaded the sheriff that justice would be better served by having the initial hearing here. More efficient." Elias exchanged a worried glance with Nia. This was moving too fast, and not in a direction that boded well for him. "Sheriff," Dakota spoke up from where he and Two Bears had been silently observing, "we will stay to witness this hearing. The chief will want to know that justice is done." The sheriff looked to Mercer, who seemed less than pleased by this development, but nodded curtly. "Fine, though I don't see what concern it is of your tribe what happens to a white horse thief." "Elias McCrae is married to one of our people," Dakota replied. "That makes him our concern." Mercer's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Is that so? How very convenient for him." Before Elias could respond, the sheriff took him by the arm. "That's enough talk for now. Time to get you settled in for the night." As Elias was led away, he locked eyes with Nia, trying to convey all his love and concern in a single look. "Find Mrs. Leary's boarding house," he called to her. "I'll be fine." "I'll be back in the morning," she promised, her voice steady despite the fear he could see in her eyes. The inside of the jail was about what Elias had expected. A small office with a desk and a gun rack and 2 cells in the back, one of which already contained a man sleeping off what smelled like a substantial amount of whiskey. "Home sweet home," the sheriff said, unlocking the empty cell, "at least until the judge gets here." As the cell door clanged shut behind him, Elias asked, "Is Mercer staying in town?" The sheriff nodded as he turned the key in the lock. "Got a room at Mrs. Leary's. Only decent place to stay in Miller's Creek." Elias's heart sank. The same place Nia was headed. "Sheriff, my wife—" "Ain't my concern where she stays," the sheriff cut him off. "But if you're worried about Mercer, don't be. He's a gentleman. Wouldn't harm a lady, even an Indian one." Elias wasn't so sure about that, but arguing wouldn't help. Instead, he asked, "Can I get some paper and a pencil? Need to write some things." "Down for the judge." The sheriff considered this, then shrugged. "Don't see the harm in that. I'll bring you some after supper." Left alone in the cell, Elias sat on the narrow cot and tried to make sense of what was happening. Why would Mercer pursue him like this after agreeing their debt was settled? The barn fire was a complete fabrication, at least as far as Elias's involvement was concerned. There had been no mention of any fire when Elias had returned to the ranch with the 20 horses. The only explanation was Clara. She must have convinced her father that Elias was responsible for the fire if there even was one. But why wait so long to come after him? It had been months since he'd left Texas, unless they had only recently discovered where he was. Elias hadn't made any secret of his destination when he left with the horses, telling anyone who asked that he was headed to Apache territory. But it was a big territory, and finding one man among the scattered Apache bands would be like finding a needle in a haystack. So how had they tracked him to Painted Bluff? And why go to all this trouble? For a crime he hadn't committed. Outside the jail, Naya was having troubles of her own. Mrs. Leary's boarding house was a neat 2-story building with a sign advertising clean rooms at fair prices. But when Naya knocked on the door, the stern-faced woman who answered took one look at her and started to close it again. "We're full up," she said curtly. Naya put her foot in the door. "The sheriff said you had rooms available." "Not for your kind," Mrs. Leary replied, trying unsuccessfully to push the door closed against Nia's resistance. "I have money," Nia said, holding up a small pouch of coins, "and I'm a married woman. My husband is being held at the jail. All I need is a place to sleep for a few nights." Mrs. Leary hesitated, the mention of money clearly catching her interest. But before she could respond, a new voice joined the conversation. "Let her in, Mrs. Leary. I'll vouch for her." Nia turned to see a young white woman standing on the porch behind her. She was elegantly dressed, with golden hair arranged in fashionable curls and blue eyes that assessed Nia with open curiosity. "Miss Mercer, I don't think your father would approve," Mrs. Leary began. "My father doesn't need to approve of everything I do," the young woman interrupted. "And I say this lady deserves a room as much as anyone. I'll pay for it myself if that's what it takes." Mrs. Leary's resistance crumbled in the face of this unexpected support. "Very well, Miss Mercer, if you insist." As the door opened wider, to admit them both, the young woman offered Nia a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Clara Mercer," she introduced herself, extending a gloved hand. "And you must be Mrs. McCrae. I've been so looking forward to meeting you." The way she said it sent a chill down Nia's spine. This was the woman who had pursued Elias, who might well be behind the false accusations against him. And now she was offering help with a smile that promised anything but. "Thank you for your assistance," Nia said carefully, ignoring the outstretched hand. "But I can pay my own way." Clara's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course you can, but I insist on helping anyway. After all," she added with a meaningful look, "we have so much to talk about, you and I. Don't we, Mrs. McCrae?" In that moment, Nia knew with absolute certainty that Clara Mercer was indeed the key to Elias's predicament. And somehow, Nia would have to find a way to deal with this beautiful, dangerous woman if she wanted to save her husband from a punishment he didn't deserve. As Mrs. Leary led them upstairs to the available rooms, Nia felt Clara's eyes on her back like the touch of cold fingers. Whatever game the Mercer woman was playing, it was clear she considered Nia a pawn to be moved or removed at will. But Clara Mercer didn't know who she was dealing with. Nia had survived raids and disease, hunger and hardship. She had tracked game through blizzards and healed wounds that would have killed most men. And more importantly, she had finally found love after years of being alone. She wasn't about to let anyone take that away from her, not even a spoiled, vindictive woman with money and power on her side. Game recognized game, and Nia was playing to win. Nia's room at Mrs. Leary's boarding house was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window overlooking the dusty main street of Miller's Creek. She stood at that window now, watching as darkness settled over the town, her mind racing with worry for Elias and wariness about Clara Mercer's unexpected kindness. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it cautiously to find Clara standing there, now dressed in a simpler gown than before, though still far more elegant than anything Nia owned. "I thought perhaps you might join me for tea," Clara said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It must be so difficult for you, being in a strange town with your husband in such trouble." Nia considered refusing, but quickly realized this might be her only chance to understand what Clara truly wanted. "Thank you," she said, matching Clara's false smile with one of her own. "That's very kind." Clara led her to a small sitting room at the end of the hall, where a tea service had already been laid out on a delicate table. 2 comfortable chairs faced each other across the table, and a cheerful fire burned in the grate, warding off the autumn chill. "Please sit," Clara invited, taking one of the chairs and gesturing to the other. "Mrs. Leary makes a passable tea, though it's nothing like what we serve at Mercer Ranch." Nia sat, her back straight, her eyes never leaving Clara's face. "You have a large ranch?" "One of the largest in West Texas," Clara said proudly as she poured tea into 2 cups. 10,000 acres, 300 head of cattle, and some of the finest horses this side of the Mississippi. My father built it from nothing." "Impressive," Nia acknowledged, accepting the cup Clara offered. She didn't drink, waiting to see if Clara would sip first. Clara noticed her hesitation and laughed lightly. "It's not poisoned, Mrs. McCrae. See?" She took a deliberate sip from her own cup. Nia followed suit, finding the tea surprisingly good. "So you said you were looking forward to meeting me," she said, deciding to get straight to the point. "Why is that?" Clara set her cup down, all pretense of friendliness vanishing from her face. "I wanted to see what kind of woman would make Elias McCrae settle down. After all, he was so resistant to the idea when I suggested it. So there it was, out in the open." "You wanted him for yourself," Nia stated simply. "I did," Clara admitted without shame. He was different from the other ranch hands, educated, well-spoken despite his rough appearance, and handsome, of course. She studied Nia over the rim of her teacup. "But he turned me down, said he wasn't the marrying kind. Yet, here you buy." "Ah, his wife, I find that interesting." "People change," Nia said carefully. "Sometimes they just need to find the right reason." Clara's eyes hardened. "How romantic. And convenient for you, I'm sure, to have a white husband. It must make life easier." Nia felt anger flare inside her, but kept her voice level. "Nothing about our life together has been easy, Miss Mercer, but it has been honest, which is more than I can say for these charges against him." "You think my father is lying?" Clara asked, arching a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "I think someone is," Nia replied, holding Clara's gaze steadily. "Elias made restitution for the horses he took. He worked off his debt fairly. And he was nowhere near your ranch when any barn burned down." Clara's lips curved into a cold smile. "And yet there's a warrant for his arrest, signed by a judge. His word against my father's. Who do you think people will believe? A respected rancher or a known thief?" "The truth has a way of coming out," Nia said, setting down her teacup with careful precision. "Especially when someone has a personal reason to lie." Clara's smile vanished. "Be careful, Mrs. McCrae. You're a long way from your village with few friends in this town. My father intends to see Elias punished, and what my father intends generally comes to pass." "Why?" Nia asked, leaning forward slightly. "Why go to all this trouble for a man who simply turned you down? Surely you've had other suitors." Something flickered in Clara's eyes, pain perhaps, or anger. "It's the principle of the thing. No one refuses a Mercer, not without consequences. Even if those consequences are unjust, even if an innocent man hangs for a crime he didn't commit." "He won't hang," Clara said dismissively. "Probably just a few years in prison, and he's hardly innocent. He did steal those horses initially, for which he's already paid the price," Nia countered. "This is about your wounded pride, nothing more." Clara stood abruptly, her face flushing with anger. "You understand nothing. Elias McCrae made a fool of me, and now he'll pay for it. And if you're wise, you'll go back to your people and forget him. Find yourself another husband, one of your own kind this time." Nia rose as well, standing eye to eye with the taller woman. "Elias is my husband. My people are his people now, and I will not leave him to face your lies alone." "Then you're a fool," Clara spat, "and you'll both suffer for it." With that, she swept from the room, leaving Nia alone with the cooling tea, and the certainty that Clara Mercer was indeed the architect of Elias's current predicament. The question was, what could Nia do about it? She returned to her room deep in thought. She needed to see Elias, to tell him what she had learned, but that would have to wait until morning. For now, she needed to think, to plan. Clara, clearly, had no intention of backing down, and James Mercer seemed determined to see Elias punished, whether for his daughter's sake or his own pride. A soft tap at her window startled her. She looked up to see Dakota's face peering through the glass. Quickly, she unlatched the window and helped him climb inside. "Dakota, what are you doing here?" "Checking on you," he replied simply. "Two Bears and I have been watching the jail and this house. We saw the Mercer woman enter your room earlier. She invited me for tea," Nia explained, "to threaten me, though she tried to disguise it at first." Dakota's expression darkened. "What did she say?" Nia quickly recounted her conversation with Clara, watching Dakota's face grow more troubled with each word. "This is bad," he said when she had finished. "If the father is as determined as the daughter, Elias may not get a fair hearing." "No," Nia agreed grimly. "But there must be something we can do, some way to prove he didn't burn that barn." Dakota was silent for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. "The horses," he finally said. "The 20 horses Elias brought to our village, they came from the Mercer ranch, yes?" Nia nodded. "Elias said the rancher let him take them as payment for breaking and training them. It settled his debt for the 2 horses he had taken earlier. And this rancher, this Mercer, he knew Elias was bringing the horses to Apache territory." "Yes, Elias said he told him where he was going." Dakota's eyes gleamed with sudden insight. Then why would a man who believed Elias had burned his barn and killed 2 valuable horses allow him to take 20 more? And why wait months to pursue him? Nia's heart quickened with hope. "You're right, it makes no sense. If Mercer truly believed Elias was responsible for the fire, he would never have let him leave with more horses, and he certainly wouldn't have waited so long to press charges." "We need witnesses," Dakota said decisively. "People who were at the ranch when Elias left with the horses. People who can testify that there was no mention of any fire then." "But how do we find such witnesses?" Nia asked. "The ranch is hundreds of miles away in Texas." Dakota smiled slightly. "Perhaps we don't need to go to Texas. Perhaps Texas has come to us." "What do you mean?" "I saw men arrive in town today," Dakota explained. "Cowboys by their dress. They are staying at the saloon. I heard one mention Mercer's name as they entered." Hope surged through Nia. "Mercer must have brought some of his ranch hands with him. If we could talk to them, find out what really happened." "Leave that to me and 2 Bears," Dakota said. "We will learn what we can. You should rest. Tomorrow will not be easy." After Dakota had slipped back out the window, Nia lay on her bed, too wound up to sleep despite her exhaustion. She found herself touching the wooden ring Elias had carved for her, drawing comfort from its smooth surface. Whatever happened tomorrow, she would not give up on him. Not ever. Morning came too quickly, bringing with it a fine drizzle that turned the main street of Miller's Creek into a muddy mess. Nia dressed carefully in her cleanest clothes, braided her hair neatly, and made her way to the jail as soon as it was light enough to see. Sheriff Taylor was at his desk when she arrived, looking tired and irritable. "Come to see your husband?" he asked without preamble. "Yes," Nia replied simply. The sheriff sighed and stood up, taking a ring of keys from his desk. 10 minutes, that's all, and no passing him anything. I'll be watching." He led her to the cells in the back, where Elias was sitting on his cot, a half-eaten breakfast on a tray beside him. He jumped to his feet when he saw her. "Nia!" The relief in his voice was palpable. "Are you all right? Where did you stay?" "I'm fine," she assured him, stepping as close to the bars as the sheriff would allow. "I got a room at Mrs. Leary's boarding house. Thanks to Clara Mercer," the sheriff added pointedly. Elias's face darkened. "Clara's here too?" Nia nodded slightly, her eyes warning him not to say too much in front of the sheriff. "She and her father are both staying at Mrs. Leary's. She was kind enough to insist that I be given a room." Elias understood her meaning instantly. "I see? And have you had a chance to talk with her?" "We had tea last night," Nia said carefully. "It was an illuminating conversation." Elias ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Nia knew meant he was worried. "Nia, listen to me. Clara is dangerous. More dangerous than her father in some ways. Don't trust anything she says or does." "I know," Nia assured him. I've met women like her before. Different clothes, same heart. The sheriff cleared his throat impatiently. Time's about up. What happens now? Nia asked quickly. When will you see the judge? Circuit judge should be here day after tomorrow, the sheriff answered for him. Trial will probably start the day after that, assuming Mercer's lawyer makes it in time. And my husband gets a lawyer too, yes? Nia asked, remembering what little she knew of white men's legal proceedings. The sheriff shrugged. If he can afford one. Otherwise, the judge might appoint someone. I'll be fine, Nia, Elias said, reaching through the bars to touch her hand. The truth is on our side. The truth and something more, she whispered, squeezing his fingers briefly before the sheriff pulled her away. That's enough, he said firmly. You can come back this afternoon if you want. Outside the jail, Nia found Takoda waiting for her. His expression grim but determined. We need to talk, he said without preamble. Not here. He led her to a small alley between the general store and the blacksmith's shop, where they were unlikely to be overheard. Two Bears and I spoke with one of Mercer's men last night, he told her in a low voice. A young cowboy named Jake. He was in his cups at the saloon, and for a few coins he became quite talkative. What did he say? Nia asked eagerly. The says barn did burn, Takoda confirmed. 2 months ago, not when Elias left, and everyone at the ranch knows it was an accident. A lantern knocked over during a storm. No one blamed Elias, who had been gone for months by then. Nia's eyes widened. Then why is Mercer claiming Elias did it? According to this, Jake, Miss Mercer was upset when she learned Elias had married. Apparently, news reached them when a trader passed through who had seen Elias at our village with his new bride. The very next day, she convinced her father that Elias must have started the fire before he left as revenge for some imagined slight. But that's ridiculous, Nia protested. Surely Mercer didn't believe that. The father does whatever his daughter wants, Takoda said with a shrug. And Jake said the daughter was determined to bring Elias back to Texas by any means necessary. To punish him, Nia murmured, remembering Clara's cold eyes. For choosing someone else. Perhaps. Takoda looked troubled. But there is more. Jake let slip that Miss Mercer has spoken of reclaiming what is hers once Elias is convicted, as if she expects him to turn to her for help. A chill ran down Nia's spine as she understood. She doesn't want him punished. She wants him desperate. Desperate enough to accept her help in exchange for what? Leaving me? It would seem so. Takoda agreed grimly. A clever trap. The father gets his revenge for his daughter's wounded pride, and the daughter gets another chance to win the man she wants. We need this Jake to testify, Nia said urgently. To tell the judge what really happened. Takoda shook his head. He fears Mercer too much. He was already regretting his loose tongue this morning when two bears approached him again. Nia's mind raced, trying to find a solution. Then we need someone Mercer can't intimidate, someone whose word will carry weight with the judge. An idea began to form in her mind. Takoda, how fast can you ride? As fast as needed, he replied, a question in his eyes. I need you to take a message to Chief Nakohe, she said. And then, I need you to go to the Sanderson Ranch, about 20 miles west of here. The Sanderson Ranch, why? Because Frank Sanderson is the territorial representative, Nia explained. Elias mentioned him once, said he was known as a fair man who stood up for what was right even when it wasn't popular. If anyone can help us, it's him. Takoda nodded slowly. And the message to the chief? Tell him what we've learned, Nia said, and ask him to bring as many of our people as he thinks wise. Not for fighting, she added quickly, seeing Takoda's expression. For witnessing. The white man's justice system works differently when important people are watching. As Takoda slipped away to carry out her requests, Nia squared her shoulders and headed for the general store. She had preparations of her own to make. Clara Mercer might have money and influence on her side, but Nia had truth and determination on hers. And she wasn't about to let Elias face this alone. The next day passed in a haze of anxious waiting. Nia visited Elias twice, keeping their conversations light and hopeful under the watchful eye of the sheriff. She didn't tell him about Takoda's mission or what they had learned from Jake. Better to keep that information close until it could do the most good. She saw Clara Mercer only once, across the dining room at Mrs. Leary's boarding house. The blonde woman had smiled at her with cold triumph, clearly believing she had already won. Nia had smiled back, a smile that seemed to unsettle Clara slightly before she turned away. By the evening of the second day, there was still no sign of Dakota or Two Bears, and Nia began to worry that her plan had failed. The circuit judge was due to arrive the following morning, and without witnesses to counter Mercer's claims, Elias's chances looked bleak. She was sitting by the window of her room, watching the rain that had been falling steadily all day, when she heard it, the distant thunder of hoofbeats, many of them approaching the town. Peering through the rain-streaked glass, she saw a procession of riders entering the main street, led by a tall figure she recognized immediately as Chief Nakohe. Behind him rode at least 20 warriors from their village, all mounted on their best horses, all wearing their finest regalia despite the rain. And behind them came Dakota, riding alongside a white man in a rain-slicked coat whose bearing marked him as someone of importance. Frank Sanderson, Nia hoped fervently. The arrival of such a large party of Apache warriors caused an immediate stir in the small town. Lights appeared in windows up and down the street, and people emerged onto porches despite the rain, watching nervously as the procession made its way toward the center of town. Nia grabbed her shawl and hurried downstairs, nearly colliding with Clara Mercer in the front hall of the boarding house. "What is the meaning of this?" Clara demanded, her face pale with anger or fear. Nia couldn't tell which. "Did you bring them here?" "They're here to ensure justice is done," Nia replied calmly, stepping around the other woman and out into the rain. She hurried to meet the riders, her heart lifting at the sight of so many familiar faces. Chief Nakohe dismounted when he saw her, his weathered face solemn but his eyes kind. "Nia," he greeted her. "Dakota has told us what happened. We are here to stand with you and Elias." "Thank you, Chief," she said, emotion making her voice thick. "I didn't expect so many to come. He is one of us now," the chief said simply. "We do not abandon our own." The white man Nia had seen riding with Dakota dismounted as well, approaching with a direct, assessing gaze. He was older, perhaps in his 50s, with a neatly trimmed beard and intelligent eyes. "Mrs. McCrae?" he asked. "I'm Frank Sanderson. Your friend here," he nodded toward Dakota, "gave me quite an earful about James Mercer and his daughter. If half of what he says is true, we've got ourselves a serious miscarriage of justice in the making." Relief washed over Nia. "It's all true, Mr. Sanderson, and there's more you should know." By now a small crowd had gathered, drawn by the unusual spectacle. Among them, Nia spotted James Mercer, his face darkening with anger as he recognized the Apache warriors. Sheriff Taylor pushed through the crowd, his hand hovering near his gun. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "Chief, this is a lot of men to bring into town. Folks are getting nervous." "We come in peace," Chief Nakohe assured him, "to witness the trial of one of our people." "One of your—" The sheriff broke off, confused. "You mean McCrae? He's white. He is married to Nia," the chief replied. "That makes him Apache in our eyes, and we have reason to believe he is being falsely accused." "That's a serious allegation," a new voice cut in. James Mercer had pushed his way to the front of the crowd, his face flushed with anger. "And who are you to question my integrity?" "Frank Sanderson, territorial representative," Sanderson introduced himself, stepping forward to face Mercer. "And I've got some questions about this case myself, James." Mercer's face paled slightly. "Frank, I didn't know you were involved in this matter." "I am now," Sanderson said firmly, "and I'd like to get to the bottom of these charges before Judge Williams arrives tomorrow. Specifically, I'd like to know why you're claiming Elias McCrae burned down your barn when your own ranch hands know it was an accident that happened months after he left." A murmur ran through the crowd. Mercer's eyes darted around, landing briefly on Nia before returning to Sanderson. "My ranch hands don't know what they're talking about. The evidence clearly points to McCrae." "What evidence?" Sanderson pressed. "Because I've got a sworn statement from Jake Miller saying the fire was caused by a knocked-over lantern during a storm 2 months ago, long after McCrae had left your employ with your full knowledge and blessing." Mercer's face flushed deeper. "Jake Miller is a drunk and a liar. I'll have him fired for this. Hard to fire a man who no longer works for you, Sanderson pointed out. Jake quit this morning right after signing his statement. Seems he found his conscience weighed more than his fear of you, James. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Nia spotted Clara pushing her way forward, her face a mask of fury. This is ridiculous, she declared. My father is a respected rancher. His word should count for more than some Apache woman's husband and a disgruntled employee. And what about your word, Miss Mercer? Sanderson asked, turning his penetrating gaze on her. Would you swear under oath that you believe Elias McCrae burned that barn? Or would you admit that you concocted this story to punish him for rejecting your advances and marrying someone else? Clara recoiled as if struck. How dare you? It's a simple question, Sanderson insisted. One I'm sure Judge Williams will be interested in asking tomorrow, along with why you told at least 3 people in this town that you intended to reclaim what is yours once McCrae was convicted. Clara's eyes darted to her father, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Father, don't listen to them. They're trying to trick you. Is that true, Clara? Mercer asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. Did you lie to me about the fire? Of course not, Clara protested, but her voice had risen to a shrill pitch that betrayed her panic. Elias burned that barn. He must have. Who else would have reason to? No one, Sanderson said quietly. Because according to your foreman, who I spoke with before riding here, it was an accident. Plain and simple. An accident that you decided to use to your advantage when you learned Elias had married. Clara's composure finally cracked. He was supposed to come back to me, she cried, tears of rage filling her eyes. Not run off to some savage and marry her instead. He was mine. A shocked silence fell over the crowd. Even James Mercer seemed stunned by his daughter's outburst. Clara, he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. What have you done? Clara looked around, wildly seeing the judgment in every face. With a strangled sob, she turned and fled back toward the boarding house. Mercer watched her go, his shoulders slumping. Then he turned to Sheriff Taylor. Sheriff, I'd like to withdraw my complaint against Elias McCrae. It appears there's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Nia stepped forward, unable to contain her anger any longer. You were willing to send an innocent man to prison or worse, because your daughter couldn't accept that he didn't want her. That's not a misunderstanding, Mr. Mercer. That's a crime. The lady's right, Sanderson agreed grimly. False accusations, abuse of the legal system, attempted obstruction of justice. These are serious matters, James. Judge Williams won't look kindly on them. Mercer's face had gone ashen. What are you saying? I'm saying you'd better hope McCrae is the forgiving type, Sanderson replied. Because right now he's got grounds for charges of his own against you and your daughter. The sheriff, who had been watching this exchange with growing alarm, finally spoke up. So what happens now? Do I release McCrae or not? Release him, Sanderson said firmly. The charges have been withdrawn, and I'd suggest you apologize to him while you're at it. Man's been locked up for nothing. As the sheriff hurried off to the jail, Nia turned to Chief Nakohe and Takoda, tears of relief and gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, she said simply, for believing in him, for coming all this way. We protect our own, the chief repeated, placing a weathered hand on her shoulder. Always. When Elias emerged from the jail a few minutes later, looking confused but relieved, Nia ran to him, throwing herself into his arms with a cry of joy. He held her tightly, his face buried in her hair, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. What happened? He asked when they finally pulled apart. The sheriff just said the charges were dropped, something about Mercer withdrawing his complaint. It's a long story, Nia said, smiling through her tears, but the short version is that Clara lied about the fire, and her father believed her. Takoda found a witness who told the truth, and Mr. Sanderson here, she nodded toward the territorial representative, made sure they couldn't ignore it. Elias looked around, taking in the crowd of Apache warriors, Frank Sanderson and the gathered townspeople. His eyes widened as he spotted James Mercer standing off to one side, looking uncomfortable and ashamed. You did all this for me? Asked Nia, his voice hushed with wonder. Not just me, she corrected him. All of us, your people, our people. Elias swallowed hard, visibly moved. Then he straightened his shoulders and walked over to where Mercer stood. Mr. Mercer, he said formally. I believe we have some things to discuss. Mercer nodded stiffly. Indeed we do, McCrae. I owe you an apology for starters. I should have questioned Clara's story more carefully. Yes, you should have, Elias agreed without rancor. But I understand wanting to believe your child, just as I understand why Clara might have wanted revenge. I wasn't as clear with her as I should have been about my feelings. That's generous. Of you, Mercer admitted. More generous than I deserve. If you want to press charges, as Sanderson suggested, I won't fight them. Elias considered this for a long moment, then shook his head. No, I think we've all had enough of courtrooms and charges. Let's just agree that our accounts are settled once and for all. Relief washed over Mercer's face. Thank you, McCrae, and for what it's worth, I truly am sorry. Just make sure Clara understands that I'm not coming back, Elias said firmly. Not now, not ever. My life is with Nia and our people in Painted Bluff. I'll make sure she understands, Mercer promised. And I think it's time I took her back east for a while. Away from the ranch, away from these memories. She needs a fresh start. Don't we all, Elias agreed, extending his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Mercer shook it, sealing their truce. As Elias returned to Nia's side, Frank Sanderson approached them with a thoughtful expression. That was well handled, McCrae. Not many men would be so forgiving after what you've been through. Holding on to anger only poisons yourself, Elias replied, slipping an arm around Nia's waist. Something my wife taught me. Wise woman, Sanderson observed with a smile. And you're a lucky man. Don't I know it, Elias agreed, pulling Nia closer. That night, a celebration was held at the edge of town, where the Apache warriors had made camp. The people of Miller's Creek, initially wary of so many Indians in their midst, gradually relaxed when they realized no harm was intended. A few of the braver ones even ventured out to the camp, drawn by the music and the tantalizing smell of roasting meat. Nia and Elias sat by the main fire, surrounded by their people, including Chief Nakohe, Takoda, and 2 bears. Frank Sanderson had joined them as well, engaged in deep conversation with the chief about matters affecting the territory and the Apache lands within it. I still can't believe you did all this, Elias said quietly to Nia as they watched the flames dance. Organized a rescue party, found a witness, brought in a territorial representative, all in 2 days. Nia smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. I told you once that I was tired of losing things, that I wanted to save something for once. Remember? I remember, Elias said softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. That day in the cave, when I was still half frozen and convinced I wasn't worth saving. You were worth it then, Nia said, raising her face to his. And you're worth it now. Elias cupped her cheek in his hand, his eyes reflecting the firelight and something deeper, warmer. On the eve of our wedding, I told you I never learned how to stay. But you've taught me that and so much more, Nia. You've taught me what it means to have a home, to belong somewhere or to someone. And you've taught me to trust again, she replied, to believe in promises, even when everything in my past told me not to. Speaking of promises, Elias said, his expression growing serious, there's something I need to tell you, something I've been thinking about since we got married. Nia felt a flicker of concern. What is it? I want us to start a school, he said, surprising her completely. In the village. For the children, to teach them to read and write English, to understand numbers and maps, all the things they'll need to navigate the changing world around them. But also to teach them the Apache language in written form, to preserve your stories. And traditions. Nia stared at him, momentarily speechless. A school, but why? Because the world is changing, whether we want it to or not, Elias explained earnestly. The white settlements are getting closer every year. The children need to be prepared, to have every advantage we can give them. But they also need to hold on to who they are, to be proud of their heritage. And you want to teach them this, Nia asked, still trying to absorb the idea. We both would, Elias said. You know the traditions, the stories, the medicine. I know English and numbers and a bit about the outside world. Together we could give them something valuable, a foot in both worlds. Nia thought about it, imagining the children of the village learning to read and write, to speak confidently to outsiders, while still honoring their own ways. It was a powerful vision, and one that stirred something deep within her. "I think it's a wonderful idea," she said finally, "but what about the elders? Will they approve?" "I spoke with Chief Nakohe about it before all this happened," Elias admitted. "He was cautiously supportive, especially when I emphasized that we would be teaching Apache traditions alongside the new skills." "You've been planning this for a while," Nia realized. "Since our wedding," Elias confirmed. "I wanted to do something meaningful, something that would benefit the village and honor your people. And I thought—" "Our people," Nia corrected him gently. "Our village." Elias smiled, the firelight catching the tears that had gathered in his eyes. "Our people," he agreed. "Our home." Around them, the celebration continued. Apache warriors and curious townspeople mingling in a way that would have seemed impossible just days before. Frank Sanderson and Chief Nakohe had moved from conversation to negotiation, discussing a formal treaty that would protect the tribe's hunting grounds from encroachment. Dakota was demonstrating Apache hunting techniques to a group of fascinated young men from town. It was a night of bridges being built, of understanding beginning to grow between people who had long viewed each other with suspicion and fear. And at the center of it all sat Nia and Elias, the unlikely couple whose love had sparked it all, a love that had survived separation, doubt, and now false accusation. A love as strong as 20 horses and as true as a promise kept. The journey home to Painted Bluff took 3 days, the large party moving at a leisurely pace now that the urgency was gone. Elias rode beside Nia, often reaching across to touch her hand or smile at her, as if reassuring himself that she was still there, that they were both free and together. Frank Sanderson rode with them for the first day, discussing his plans for improving relations between the Apache and the white settlements in the territory. He was particularly interested in Elias's idea for a school and promised to send books and supplies when he could. "The territory's changing," he told them as they parted ways at a crossroads, "but it doesn't have to change for the worse. People like you two, bridging 2 worlds, finding common ground, you're the future." As they approached Painted Bluff, on the afternoon of the 3rd day, Nia felt her heart lighten at the sight of the familiar canyons and mesas rising against the blue sky. This was home, and she was bringing Elias back safe, just as she had promised Casa she would. The entire village turned out to greet them, Casa at the forefront, her wrinkled face breaking into a rare smile when she saw Nia and Elias riding, side by side. Children ran alongside their horses shouting welcome, while the adults called out greetings and raised their hands in salute to the returning warriors. That evening, as the story of their journey and Elias's vindication was told, around the central fire, Nia noticed a change in the way the villagers looked at her husband. The last lingering doubts seemed to have vanished, replaced by a respect and acceptance that was palpable. "They see you now," she whispered to him as they sat together, listening to Dakota recount the confrontation with the Mercers. "Not as a white man who married one of their own, but as a man who belongs here." "It feels good," Elias admitted, "like I've finally found where I'm supposed to be." Later, as they walked back to their lodge under a sky blazing with stars, Nia felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. The broken parts of her life, the losses, the pain, the solitude, had somehow been mended, not erased, but transformed into something stronger. "What are you thinking about?" Elias asked, noting her thoughtful expression. "About how sometimes the worst storms bring the greatest gifts," she replied. "If that blizzard hadn't come last winter, if you hadn't gotten lost in it, if you hadn't found me half frozen under that pine tree," he continued for her, "none of this would have happened." She finished. "We would never have met, never have fallen in love." "Maybe it was meant to be," Elias suggested. "Like your grandmother's stories about the spirits guiding people to their destined paths." "Maybe," Nia agreed with a smile. "Or maybe it was just luck, good or bad, depending on how you look at it." "Definitely good," Elias assured her, pulling her close as they reached their lodge. "The best luck of my life." Inside, a small fire burned in the central pit, casting a warm glow over their home. Elias added wood to the flames, while Nia prepared a simple meal from the provisions they had brought with them. They moved around each other with the easy familiarity of a couple who had found their rhythm, each anticipating the other's needs without words. As they sat together afterward, enjoying the warmth and quiet, Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, the broken compass that had once belonged to his mother. "I've been carrying this for so long," he said, turning it over in his hands, "holding on to it like it could somehow guide me to a place I belonged, but I don't need it anymore." He held it out to Nia. "I want our children to have it someday, to remind them that even broken things can lead you home if you follow your heart." Nia's breath caught. "Children?" Elias smiled a little uncertainly. "If you want them someday." "I do," she said softly, taking the compass from him and cradling it in her palms. "Very much." His smile widened, relief and joy mingling in his eyes. "Good, because I think we'd make pretty amazing parents, don't you? Between your healing skills and my horse training, plus that school we're going to build, our children will have the best of both worlds," Nia finished for him. "Just like us." Outside their lodge, the night deepened, stars wheeling overhead, in their ancient patterns. In the corral nearby, the 20 horses Elias had brought to the village, no longer a bride price but a symbol of his journey home, grazed peacefully. And inside, by the warmth of the fire, Nia and Elias McRae held each other close, secure in the knowledge that whatever storms might come, they would weather them together. For they had learned the most important lesson of all, that love, when built on truth and trust, could bridge any distance, heal any wound, and keep any promise, no matter how improbable it might seem. A love as vast as the canyon lands of Painted Bluff, as enduring as the ancient pines that had witnessed their first meeting, and as real as the life they were building day by day together. The end.